Hey guys, it's been AK Tapport. This morning on r/gaming on Reddit, I saw a headline that Tom Clancy's The Division has dropped 93% of its players in just 3 months. And I think I know a little bit why, and we're going to go over why IPs are so risky in the video game industry.
That was amazing. Are you like a superhero or something?
What?
Most of us get bored from time to time, and unfortunately there's not very many games you can jump onto that aren't just kind of copying each other. That's why projects that are doing something new, like Tom Clancy's The Division or Sunset Overdrive, even if they're similar to things we've seen before, they're just new for the player. For example, Sunset Overdrive is a very arcadey game that we saw released with the Xbox One, and things like Telltale Games' Walking Dead series are also good examples. The things these games are doing is they're giving gamers something new to distract themselves with, but the reason we don't see more of them is because they're always a risk for producers and their studios. When you're working on something that's never been seen before, it's always kind of a gamble if people will like it or not, and there's things like focus groups, but when you're putting millions of dollars into games these days, it's kind of a bad move to just cross your fingers and base what maybe even 1,000 people said about your game versus what thousands and maybe even millions of people will have to say about it in the long run, and how you will maintain that excitement for your product up until launch, and then in launch keeping it alive to spread it on to more people, or just keep the people who purchased your game engaged and ready for a sequel or other projects from that studio. Doing things that break the norm and are expensive to do, like, giant worlds that act in real time and have complex AI that just does its own thing, it's a huge risk to take, because you're going to spend years developing it, you're going to spend millions making it, and if no one's interested, even if there's interest before launch and then maybe right at launch, it's going to make some problems because you're not going to make your money back, and if you do, you're going to have released a dead product that you can't support any longer with things like DLC. That's probably a giant reason why we don't really see so much diversity in games that aren't independently developed. Studios, of course, and almost everything in the world today exists to make a profit. And if you break away from what people like to do, i.e. shooters and arcadey style action like that, you're just taking a bigger risk. So that's why most games we see are in that sort of gap. And not to say that The Division is a bad game, I personally haven't played it, but I've seen plenty of gameplay. It actually looks pretty fun. But what you'll see a lot of times with projects like these, even if they're very well received, people will eventually just move back to what they know. So, for example, games like, Minecraft or Ark Survival Evolved. These are games that are really fun to play in short bursts. I guess some people can play either of those for a lot longer, but I think most people just kind of go to them for a break from the usual and then go back to Call of Duty or Halo or whatever the game is that they play. To kind of make a really rough analogy, I sort of look at these games kind of like mobile apps. They're not games that you're meant to spend, 8 hours a day playing. They're games that you're just meant to pick up if you're bored or have nothing better to do. And that's not to say that there's no successful mobile games or that mobile games can't make massive amounts of money. But truth be told, I think microtransactions for these games are kind of a smaller portion of the profit, depending on the game, of course. And I think advertisements are a lot bigger part of that. And in gaming, advertisements aren't really appreciated, and it's almost a death sentence for the game. So it just adds more to the risk that even if you have advertisements and you can get, let's say, 2 cents per person that views it, the fact that your game might have an advertisement in it will just bother people. So that's not even really an option. So that just makes your next option creativity. So if you do something that's brand new that no one's seen before, you're going to draw more people in because they're interested in seeing what it is. But at the same time, you're also cutting some people off. So for example, let's compare shooters like Call of Duty to something like Tetris. If you compare the two, of course they're completely different. But if you're a shooter fan, why would you download and play or purchase something like Tetris if that's just going to occupy you for a little bit? And I think that's where lots of profit comes from. for these games, I mean, if you look at The Division, 200 million copies sold, and now down to about 100,000 players every day. Like, that's just kind of just sort of shows that people, they like the idea, but then they kind of get bored of it. And I'm factoring out things like bad ideas for, you know, for example, let's say a bad map pack or an overpowered weapon that's not being patched, or something that was patched in that breaks the game. Things like that, of course, are going to affect it negatively. Or for example, if you were to look at Halo Master Chief Collection, you'd see a massive amount of sales, no playtime, and then slowly you'd start to see playtime creep up a little bit as the game was fixed, and then start to drop off again as people start to go back to their main games again. And I'm never implying that none of these games can't be played primarily, and you know, there's people that play Halo exclusively, and more power to them. Halo's an awesome game, but lots of people, I think, are kind of just going back to Halo for the nostalgia, and then going back on to what they've come to love more. Like, for example, me, Halo is my main game, then I sort of transitioned into Call of Duty. From there I transitioned into Battlefield. I own the Halo Master Chief Collection and I own Halo 5, but I don't play those primarily because I'm just going back for the Halo experience, which I think pretty clearly shows that it's kind of hard to hold your attention with games. And another thing is games that plateau. Games like The Division or Destiny or the Ark Survival Evolved kind of plateau after a while, where you're kind of just grinding. And I think that's a big turnoff when compared to games like Call of Duty, where you're always having numbers pop up on your screen. You can always prestige, you're always unlocking something new, or you have titles and emblems and camos and all this extra stuff to unlock that just keeps you engaged. A lot of these games that are trying to do stuff like this that aren't story based, because story you can always kind of make linear, they do things that just burn people out, and just people will start to lose interest. And not to say that that's the only way, you know, doing something open world or, you know, something that's multiplayer like that, not to say that's the only way you can bring something new to the table, but that is definitely the way the world wants things right now. They definitely don't like single player games as much as they did before, and they're less accepting of them, which again is going to narrow down what the publisher or studio is going to want to do. So to sum this all up, making a game that is unique is risky, and I've repeated that a couple times now. But I think it's still something that studios should definitely do, because every now and then something sticks. Plus, it's a giant treat for gamers to have something to fall back onto and play. For example, this gameplay you've been watching is Sunset Overdrive. I've never played it before. It was free on Xbox, so I downloaded it, and I've just played it today, and it's actually a blast. And it's a nice break from, you know, Counter-Strike or Battlefield or Battlefront, which I've been playing a little bit as well lately. Because you just get tired of those things. It's fun to have something goofy to play every now and then. And it's not to say there's not kind of bigger games that do that. I guess Mario Party, if they're still making that as an example, but there's really not too much that it just lets gamers have fun and just lets gamers have a unique experience. So if you're watching this, developers, just keep it up. I know the numbers might not be as great as Call of Duty or, you know, whatever else you're working on that's much bigger, but it's definitely a treat. So anyway, this has been Ben, aka Tapport. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Peace.